Hello, class. Today is March 17th, which means it is St. Patrick's Day. And of course, St. Patrick's Day being a tradition of Irish celebration and heritage through music and festival and song, all of that is unfortunately being interrupted by the coronavirus. And I don't know about you folks, but cabin fever is definitely starting to settle in my house. So I thought it'd be a great way to combat the settling in of cabin fever, and also a way to celebrate St. Patrick's Day still by going over the history of the Irish potato famine. And no, you don't have to watch this for class, but if you're interested and you're bored, this would be a great way to celebrate St. Patrick's Day with your old boy profs. And a little bit, a note about myself: I'm kind of an Irish cultural enthusiast. My grandmother's from Tullamore. My other side is Irish too, and being reared in that Boston Irish South Shore tradition, you hear the songs, the tales, the folklore and traditions of the old country, and you really do build strong emotional, almost kind of romanticized Ireland in your mind. So St. Patrick's Day is truly a celebration that's near and dear to my heart. So let's go into the history of the Irish potato famine together in order to celebrate. Between 1844 and 1851, you actually have about 1 million Irish peasants dying due to a potato blight, a virus that caused the potato crop failure that killed about 1 million Irish people from starvation. And one of the reasons why this potato blight was so horrible in Ireland is because the Irish were so reliant on potatoes for subsistence. And that begs the question: why were the Irish so reliant on taters?
Potatoes. Boil 'em, mash 'em, stick 'em in a stew. Boil 'em, mash 'em, stick 'em in a stew.
Right? Sorry. Well, it actually has to do with Irish history and their conflict with Great Britain. All the way back from the 12th century, you have the English Norman invasion of Ireland, where English landlords gobbled up huge swaths of Ireland and were granted huge tracts of land. So absentee landlords that actually didn't live in Ireland very often, lived in England, would rent out their lands to lesser nobles and Irish peasants who would work the land, harvest crops, and in turn would be given small plots of land to fend for themselves. And if you have an Irish Catholic family of 7 or 8 children, you have to produce a lot of food in a small area of land. So the potato became the perfect crop that the Irish relied on, that became the staple of their diet. So when you have the potato crop absolutely destroyed by this blight, it hits the Irish peasants super hard, and it makes it so that they are dying from starvation en masse. If you read diaries of people that visited Ireland in the 1840s and 1850s, they're walking around those beautiful green covered hills and rock walls with sheep, but there are men, women, and children who have died with grass and dirt in their mouth from starvation. And it is absolutely horrible. So, as a result of this terrible famine, of course, people weren't going to stick around and wait to die. You actually had huge waves of migrations out of Ireland. And between 1840 and 1930, you actually have 4.5 million Irish men, women, children coming to the United States. In one year in the 1800s alone in Boston, the Irish population went from about 30,000 to over 100,000 people. And this caused a huge backlash, and groups like nativists started to try to combat Irish immigration, started to make arguments, political arguments, that Catholicism was incompatible with American democracy and that these Irish Catholics posed a threat. But as time goes on and as they integrate and become more Americanized, those kind of fears go away over time. So as the Irish come to the United States, many of them settle in Boston, many of them settle in New York and Philadelphia and are working in the factories, but also a huge portion of them go west. A lot of them become miners in places like Butte, Montana, like Thomas Francis Meagher the Sword, who was an Irish revolutionary who was actually exiled, I believe, to Tasmania, escaped, goes to the United States, and then joins the Union Army, became the governor of Montana before he was lynched, possibly by Protestants who resented him. And a lot of Irish Catholics joined both the Union and, interestingly, the Confederate Army during the American Civil War and actually got a lot of training. There was a group known as the Fenians that, after the American Civil War, these Irish American veterans decided that they were going to try to invade Canada, which of course was still British controlled at the time, and hold it hostage to try to exchange it for the freedom or at least reform of Ireland. But the Fenian uprising was crushed. Irish women, in particular, many of them became domestic servants in places like Boston, New York, Philadelphia, and they are slowly becoming an integral part of American society. So I hope you enjoyed this very brief introduction to the Irish potato famine and Irish immigration. There's way more to learn. This is just a brief introduction, and I hope you guys have a wonderful St. Patrick's Day. I recommend listening to, say, the Dubliners or the Pogues or Flogging Molly or the Dropkick Murphys today in order to celebrate. Maybe you want to read some of the poetry of people like Padraig Pearse and really reflect on that cultural experience and the legacies handed down to you by those people that fled Ireland in order to find a better life in the United States and pass the torch of life and culture to the future generations. So, signing out from the car, I hope you guys have a great day. Peace out.